Canada is facing another major airline disruption, and this time, the focus is on WestJet and its cabin crew. What began as months of difficult contract negotiations turned into a serious travel crisis during one of the busiest periods of the summer. Around 4,400 WestJet flight attendants, represented by the Canadian Union of Public Employees, or CUPE, became involved in a labor dispute that eventually led to strike action, a lockout notice from the airline, and hundreds of canceled flights. For passengers, the result was confusion, canceled plans, delayed trips, and thousands of Canadians suddenly trying to figure out how they were going to reach their destinations. The situation became especially serious because WestJet had already warned travelers that disruption was possible. On July 23, the airline introduced flexible change and cancellation policies for travel scheduled between July 30 and August 4. That was a clear sign that the company was preparing for the possibility that negotiations could fail. WestJet said the policy was designed to give passengers more flexibility during the high-volume summer travel period. Then the situation escalated. On July 30, the union representing approximately 4,400 flight attendants issued a 72-hour strike notice. WestJet responded with its own 72-hour lockout notice. That distinction is important because a lockout is not the same thing as simply canceling flights. It is part of a labor dispute in which the employer prevents employees from working under certain circumstances. In this case, the notices showed just how close the two sides had come to a complete operational shutdown. The dispute had been building for months. WestJet's cabin crew collective agreement had expired at the end of 2025, and negotiations for a new agreement had continued throughout 2026. According to WestJet's bargaining information, conciliators were assigned by the federal labor minister in May, after the union had issued a notice of dispute in April. By late July, 38 articles in the collective agreement had reportedly been agreed to in principle, while 29 remained in progress. So this was not a dispute where absolutely nothing had been accomplished. A significant amount of bargaining had already taken place, but the remaining issues were important enough to threaten the airline's operations. One of the biggest disagreements involved how flight attendants are paid for work performed before and after the actual flight. CUPE argued that cabin crew should receive stronger compensation for ground duties and other work performed before departure and after landing. WestJet, on the other hand, said its existing credit hour system compensates crew for their duties rather than simply paying an hourly rate for every minute spent working. This difference may sound technical, but it is actually at the heart of the dispute because it affects how thousands of employees are compensated for the time they spend doing their jobs. The issue became even more significant because flight attendants had already voted overwhelmingly to authorize strike action. On July 15, reports said approximately 99% of voting WestJet cabin crew supported giving their union a strike mandate. That vote did not automatically mean a strike would happen. It gave the union the authority to take further action after the required process. But it was an unmistakable signal that frustration among the workers was extremely high. WestJet presented a very different picture of its offer. The company said it had proposed substantial improvements, including a 13% wage increase in the first year, additional annual increases in subsequent years, retroactive pay, and improved benefits. The airline also argued that it was trying to balance better compensation for employees with the long-term financial sustainability of the company and the affordability of air travel. The union did not consider the proposal sufficient, particularly in relation to compensation for ground work. And this is where the story becomes important for ordinary Canadian travelers, especially seniors. When an airline disruption happens, the problem is not simply that a flight disappears from a schedule. A canceled flight can create a chain reaction. You may miss a connection. You may lose a hotel reservation. You may have to rearrange transportation at your destination. You may have family members waiting for you. You may have medical appointments, cruises, weddings, funerals, or other commitments that cannot easily be moved. For a senior traveler, that disruption can be even more stressful. Imagine someone who has carefully planned a trip months in advance, booked a hotel, arranged transportation from the airport, and perhaps scheduled a medical appointment or family visit around the flight. A cancellation can force that person to make several decisions in a matter of hours. And during a major disruption, airline phone lines and online systems can become extremely busy. That is why WestJet's decision to offer flexible changes and cancellations before the strike was important. It gave eligible passengers an opportunity to change their travel plans without the normal level of fees. WestJet specifically said its flexibility policy applied to scheduled travel between July 30 and August 4, while certain WestJet Encore and partner-operated code-share flights were excluded. Travelers were directed to check WestJet's travel advisory information for the latest details. Then came the actual strike. On August 2, WestJet flight attendants went on strike after negotiations failed to produce an agreement. Reports at the time said hundreds of flights were canceled, and approximately 250,000 travelers were affected. Reuters reported that 615 flights had been canceled and that around 250,000 travelers were impacted, while other reporting placed the cancellation count at 495. The exact number changed as the disruption developed, but there was no question that the impact was enormous. The number, 250,000, is particularly important because it gives Canadians a sense of the scale of this disruption. This was not a handful of delayed flights at one airport. It affected a huge number of travelers during a peak summer holiday period. WestJet operates a major share of Canada's domestic air travel market, and the airline said it can carry more than 70,000 passengers on some days. When a significant portion of that operation is disrupted, the consequences spread quickly across airports and routes. There was also another layer to the dispute. The Canadian government. Federal officials urged the two sides to continue negotiations. Canada's Jobs Minister expressed disappointment about the disruption and encouraged the parties to reach an agreement rather than allowing the situation to continue damaging travelers and the broader economy. The government faced a difficult balance because labor disputes involve collective bargaining rights, while a prolonged airline shutdown can create significant consequences for Canadians. This situation also brought back memories of the Air Canada labor dispute in 2025, when the federal government faced pressure to intervene after flight attendants went on strike. That comparison matters because Canadians naturally began asking whether the government would take similar action again. But each labor dispute has its own circumstances, and the government does not automatically resolve every airline strike in the same way. There is also a financial side to this story. Reports estimated that the WestJet disruption was costing the airline roughly 10 to 15 million Canadian dollars per day. That illustrates why both sides had strong reasons to keep negotiating. Every additional day of cancellations means lost revenue for the airline, additional costs for rebooking and passenger support, and serious inconvenience for travelers. But here is the part many passengers may not have realized. The dispute did not necessarily mean every WestJet flight in every situation would be canceled. The impact depended on route, crew availability, aircraft positioning, and the operational wind-down process. Before the strike, WestJet and CUPE had already agreed to an operational wind-down plan. Cabin crew who were working when job action began were expected to complete their trip to the destination, while arrangements were made for workers who could not immediately return home. That is why passengers should never assume that a general headline automatically tells them what will happen to their individual booking. A flight can be affected differently from another flight on the same day. Your safest approach is always to check the airline's official flight status using your specific booking information rather than relying only on social media posts or headlines. And there is another important lesson here for Canadian seniors who travel. Keep your travel documents, booking confirmation, travel insurance information, hotel reservations, and alternative transportation details together in one place. If your flight is disrupted, you do not want to spend hours searching through emails for a confirmation number or policy document. If you are traveling for an important medical appointment, family emergency, or another time-sensitive reason, consider how much flexibility you actually have. A low-cost ticket may look attractive when you book it, but flexibility can become extremely valuable when an airline disruption occurs. Now, what happened next is just as important as the disruption itself. After the strike caused hundreds of cancellations, WestJet and CUPE reached a tentative agreement on August 3. The agreement brought the immediate strike to an end, with flight attendants returning to work pending ratification by union members. Reports said The tentative deal included improved compensation arrangements, including recognition of additional duties performed by cabin crew. That means the situation changed very quickly. One day, passengers were facing major cancellations and uncertainty. The next, the airline and union had reached a tentative agreement and operations were beginning to resume. But passengers should not expect every canceled flight to suddenly operate normally. After a major disruption, airlines have to reposition aircraft, crews, passengers, and schedules. That recovery process can take time even after an agreement has been reached. So, if you are a Canadian senior with a WestJet booking, the most important thing is not to panic and not to rely on rumors. Check your booking directly, check your flight status, read any message sent by WestJet, and understand what options are available to you. If your flight was canceled, keep records of your communications, receipts, and any expenses you incur, because those documents may become important when dealing with the airline or your travel insurer. And please, be especially careful about scams during situations like this. When thousands of travelers are desperate for refunds, replacement flights, or urgent booking changes, scammers know exactly how to exploit that anxiety. Do not give your credit card information to someone who contacts you unexpectedly, claiming they can instantly fix your canceled flight. Verify contact information through the airline's official website or your original booking documents. The biggest lesson from the WestJet crisis is that an airline labor dispute can move from negotiation to serious disruption incredibly quickly. In this case, the warning signs were visible weeks in advance. The strike authorization vote, continued negotiations, the flexible travel policy, the 72-hour strike notice, and the matching lockout notice. So, if you have a flight coming up, especially during a busy travel period, don't wait until the airport to discover there is a problem. Check your flight before leaving home. Keep your confirmation accessible. Have a backup plan if your trip is important. And if you are traveling with an older family member, make sure they have access to the booking details and know who to contact if something changes. For Canadian seniors, this story is also a reminder that retirement planning is not only about CPP, OAS, GIS, or your bank account. Unexpected travel disruptions can create real costs, especially when a person is living on a fixed income. A canceled flight, an extra hotel night, or a last-minute transportation change may seem small to some people. But for a senior carefully managing a monthly budget, those expenses can matter. The WestJet dispute may now be moving toward resolution, but the larger issue remains. Canadians need reliable information when major travel disruptions happen. Don't let a dramatic headline make the decision for you. Check the official information, understand your options, and keep your records. If you were affected by the WestJet disruption, I want to know what happened in your case. Did your flight get canceled, delayed, or rebooked? Were you able to reach WestJet quickly, or did you spend hours waiting for help? And do you think airlines and unions should be required to give passengers more advance warning when a major labor dispute threatens summer travel? Tell me your province and your experience in the comments, because your experience could help another Canadian traveler understand what to expect. And if you are planning to fly with WestJet in the coming days, check your booking directly before you leave for the airport. The situation can continue to change as the tentative agreement moves through the ratification process and the airline restores its schedule. Here at Canada Seniors Update, we will continue following the issues that can affect Canadian seniors, travelers, families, and retirees. If you want clear explanations without unnecessary confusion, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Take care, stay informed, and most importantly, never make an important travel or financial decision based only on a social media headline. Check the official information first.